Welcome to Hornbill TV's Primetime with Ngullie, ladies and gentlemen. The government of Nagaland repealing the Nagaland Municipal Act 2001 has come as a significant victory for those who have been opposing the reservation of seats for women, who felt it was an affront to Naga traditions. But that also means it has come as a huge disappointment to most women in Nagaland who were expecting women in Nagaland would now find a platform for women empowerment. But again, the issue of women empowerment, as nice and noble as it sounds, is not something that can be explained away by mere declarations of rights and equality. It is a complex issue. The issue demands a thread by thread unraveling of history and cultures, gender roles, gender truths, biological and physiological and psychosocial, socio-political and indigenous value system. Discussions on this can lead to, I believe, a resolution of a lot of issues that concerns with rights and empowerment, especially in the context of women in India. It is a topic that I believe will occupy a very sensitive space in our lives for a long time to come. That said, there is nothing that a sustained conversation of mature ideas cannot solve. But such a kind of conversation will demand more than just confrontational feminism and inflexible masculinism. It requires a mature conversation that also accepts that men and women are already equals as human, but they are not equals in capability, talent, interests, mental, physical and emotional personalities. There are a lot of differences and complexities involved there, ladies and gentlemen. There are tons and tons of research about this. However, for now though, the status quo seems to be the only comfort for women in Nagaland. The government has assured that a new act to regulate the municipal administration will be legislated soon. However, there shouldn't be that much for our women to expect, honestly, because the way history has been in Nagaland, when we start talking about reservation of seats for women, things have gotten a little bit complicated, and we have seen this in 2017. The government of Nagaland has already repealed the Nagaland Municipal Act 2001 with all the provisions that may have given our women a level of representation in local political platforms. Hence, it is understood that the new legislation might not have any of the provisions that would offer women strong representation the way the NMA 2001 did. If at all there would be concessions for women, it will most likely be limited. That's what I'm thinking about. But we'll be talking about this in our show for Friday. Let's check out what the leaders of the Ao community and of course the Naga Mothers Association have had to say in this regard since the legislation was repealed earlier. The Nagaland Minister for Rural Development and the State Institute of Rural Development on Thursday said that the government of Nagaland will be drafting a new municipal act in accordance with the wishes of the people of Nagaland. Mitsubu Jamir, the minister, was addressing a Thanksgiving program at his residence at Sangtemla Ward in Mokokchung district. During the program, Jamir asserted that the demands of each and every Naga tribe cannot be incorporated in the new draft of the NMA. Of course, the minister had to mention that changing a central act is not a cup of tea. It's a big deal actually. Nonetheless, a series of cabinet meetings was also conducted by the government, and a decision to repeal the NMA was made after the chief minister argued that the popular government was able to form the government with the Naga people giving their mandate. So therefore, by his logic, the government needs to honor the voice of the people by taking the step, no matter how huge the risks involved were. In fact, the risk was as big as choosing the people over the decision of the Supreme Court of India nonetheless. The Supreme Court's directives were put to a secondary place, Mitsubu Jamir said, and the people's voice and demands took the primary stage. That's what the minister said. It is most likely that the new municipal act may be tabled in the next session of the 14th Assembly. The sooner the better, ladies and gentlemen. But what's the big noise about all this? Because it isn't about the government. It's not just about the government, but it is also administration of the urban areas at the local level by local representatives. One can say, okay, municipal elections no lobo ikunoi, the government is there, the ADCs and the SDOs are there, the chief municipal officers are there, so there's no big deal. But it is actually something much more complex than that. The reason is that the government needs to make sure that the urban body elections are conducted early, because the municipal councils represent a delegation of both functions and powers which the government of Nagaland in Kohima cannot administrate, and it needs to have local representatives to represent the welfare of the municipal areas and the citizens there. The municipal councils and corporations are all instruments through which the state government implements the developmental agenda for citizens of all the municipal areas. The ULBs are delegated with powers by the government to ensure the upkeep of the city. That's something we should remember. That is the reason why government officials in the ranks of district and subdivision officers, for instance, the additional deputy commissioners and the subdivision officers, take over the administration of the ULPs when there are no elected members to run the system. That is the reason why electoral representatives are required for the municipal systems here. This puts pressure on the government's bureaucracy when they are actually needed elsewhere to run the state's administration. So, urban local bodies are vested with a long list of functions that are delegated to them by the state governments. So, these functions could relate to public health, welfare, regulatory functions, public safety, public infrastructure works, and of course general developmental activities that are unique to that particular municipality. So the municipal bodies oversee supply of, for instance, water supply and electricity, garbage collection, disposal, regulating businesses. They regulate land use and construction of buildings, licensing. They oversee urban planning, including town planning, and even undertake economic and social developmental surveys in works. It also takes care of water supply and engages in all industrial and commercial licensing purposes. So these are works and activities that the government at the state cannot do on its own, because the structure is different. The structure of administration is different. That is why it was required in the first place that locally elected representatives must man these councils in the first place. The government cannot afford to run the municipalities without local representatives because all the developmental agenda are pushed through the voice of these people by the representatives who represent the urban areas. The second reason is because the Supreme Court had already mandated conduct of the elections before it was repealed in Nagaland. The question of political representation entails sensitive questions of rights, equality, and opportunity. So that is one reason that the government will be under pressure to put out a new legislation very soon. These are values enshrined in the Constitution of India that the Supreme Court enforces. Sooner or later, the judiciary is going to come asking uncomfortable questions to the government of Nagaland. So, to appease the constitution, the government of Nagaland will have to instate a new legislation to replace the old one, ladies and gentlemen. However, like I said before, a new municipal legislation might have concessions for women. I believe that the government in no way will entirely frame a law that smells of unequal representation in the first place, culture or no culture. So this is the reason. Article 14, the right to equality, is often read alongside the right to equality of opportunity in Article 16, 17, and Article 18. You cannot have equality in favor of another inequality in its place. So the Nagaland government knows this well enough. I believe that the new municipal act will be a, of course, slimmer, sugar-free version of the Nagaland Municipal Act 2001, because it has to, one way or the other, accommodate women there. So we might have a new legislation, but there might be, of course, there will be very big change, especially in regard to the 33% reservation of seats for women. There might be changes, but the government cannot entirely do away with all these provisions, because like I said, if you go to Article 14, 16, 17, and 18, then we the same constitution that gives us the right to set up representatives for the municipal bodies is also the same constitutional law that provides the same right to women elsewhere. So for now, we can only hope for the best, and the legislation that will come later might not cause any kind of conflict later on. So let's just hope for the best. On the other side of the story, let's see what the Naga Mothers Association has to say in this regard. It was entirely expected that the women's lobby would respond to the Nagaland government's repealing the 2001 Act. Some women's leaders have objected to the move, asserting that it was done without any what they called civil dialogue and consultation with women. So the leaders also took note of what it alleged was the silence of two female legislators in the assembly. Obviously, they are referring to Minister Cruze and MLA Kinsey during the deliberations on the issue, as well as for abstaining from objecting or dissenting to repealing the law. These sentiments were expressed at an open state level discussions on the municipal elections by the women's leaders. Updates that we received here today said the event was organized by the Naga Mothers Association and the English Department of Nagaland University. So Professor Rosemary Tsivishu of the English Department is said to have given an account of the struggles of Naga women relating to the implementation of the Nagaland Municipal Act. Another speaker at the event was Dr. Tesinyo Kiditsa, who reportedly spoke about feminism in the context of Nagaland and Naga people. She is said to have argued for the need to identify struggles peculiar to the condition of indigenous Naga women. That was the report we received. She discussed the malady of what was stated to be internalized patriarchy. She is said to have urged the people for a need for a peaceful, non-violent strategies to challenge inequalities inherent in patriarchy. The update said a legal advisor by the name Zevi Holly Su also gave her perspectives. Given that this act was a constitutional legislation, Su explained that its implementation was inevitable and that the attempt by the Nagaland Legislative Assembly to repeal the bill in the first place was done when the matter was sub judice. This time we have got something that is related to what might be corruption. When the assembly sits and then the CAG tables its report, most of the dirt that normally goes unreported in the media is presented in a form of a booklet called the CAG Report. So this is a story that's related to this. Payments to ineligible beneficiaries under the PMAY in Nagaland is being reported. There seems to be a delayed release of funds to implementing departments and even probable payments to ineligible beneficiaries in the housing scheme, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana urban scheme in Nagaland. This was stated in the report of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India on the social, economic, general and revenue sectors for the year till March 31st, 2020. The report was tabled in the recently concluded first session of the 14th Nagaland Legislative Assembly in Kohima. The report stated that the scrutiny of records revealed an amount of 141.17 crore, which was released during December 2016 until December 2019 by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs for 23,528 beneficiaries as first installment. According to the report, it was however observed that 161 beneficiaries were ineligible on the following grounds. Their income was above 3 lakh per annum. They had more than one member of a family applying for it, or they already owned proper houses. So those were the anomalies that the authorities found. The implementing department released about 96.60 lakh at the rate of 60,000 as the first installment to 161 ineligible beneficiaries. In the report, Kohima had about 80 beneficiaries, while Dimapur had 81 beneficiaries. So out of that number, updates from our Kohima correspondent said an amount of 25.26 lakh was recovered. However, an amount of about 71.34 lakh is still yet to be recovered from 121 beneficiaries, according to that report. Again, the report said the department did not initiate any action for the recovery of the amount that was paid to the ineligible beneficiaries. So in its report, the CAG has recommended that the department take concrete steps to recover the funds from the ineligible beneficiaries. Those were the top stories for Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Women empowerment, feminism, and representation will continue to take a lot of media space. But again, if we read deeper and have been updated with socio-cultural movements across the world for the past few decades, there are always two sides of any story, and especially in this regard. There is a fast-growing movement of men's rights activists and members of masculinism who are slowly spreading across the West and Europe. This might not be a very new thing for the Western countries, but certainly for a lot of countries in Asia, this might be a new thing. I have plans to do shows and host debates on feminism in this regard, and I would like to talk about men's and women's rights in the context of constitutional rights, equality and opportunity. So if you have got any feedback in that regard and you've got some suggestions, please write to me. You can find me on Facebook, or you can write to Hornbill TV directly in this regard. So let's see how it turns out. Thank you for watching Hornbill TV, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ngullie. See you next time.